What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's under investigation by the House of Representatives and the Republicans in the House of Representatives, just revealed some information here as the House and the Senate just passed a bill and sent it to President Biden's desk. We don't know if President Biden's going to sign it. In fact, President Biden hasn't even decided yet if he's going to sign it, which is interesting. In fact, Congress passed this unanimously, which is crazy. We don't see bills passed unanimously hardly ever in Congress. It's rare. Okay. What's interesting is this bill was tried to pass, I think it was last year. It was passed in the Senate and then it was sent over to the House, and Nancy Pelosi, speaker who was speaker last year, in charge of the Democrats and in charge of the House, didn't even put it up for a vote, which made a lot of people think that maybe there was something to hide there, or they were trying to protect Dr. Anthony Fauci. Well, this bill will declassify all the information that the government has on C-19, the virus, and the pandemic. There's classified information and documents that will now be revealed if the president signs it. That's a big if. And now Dr. Anthony Fauci has come out and is actually talking about this. So take a listen to what he has to say here. Also, thanks for liking these videos. It really helps out my channel with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss out on new videos. I'm just trying to share the truth here. Yeah, because things are getting crazy. Here we go.
3 years ago today, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. There is still no consensus on the origins of the virus that has killed nearly 7 million people worldwide, including more than 1 million Americans. The question is back in the spotlight in Washington. The House yesterday unanimously approved a bill to declassify U.S. intelligence information on the origins of the coronavirus. The Senate passed it earlier, and the legislation now goes to President Biden's desk. It is not clear yet whether or not he will sign it. The president told reporters yesterday that he hasn't made that decision yet. A theory that the virus may have escaped from a lab in China has been a heated issue of this debate since early on in the pandemic. U.S. intelligence agencies are split on that. And joining us now to talk about this is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He served as President Biden's chief medical advisor and headed the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for decades, including under former President Trump. Dr. Fauci, good to see you as always. Thanks so much for being with us. President Biden, I guess you probably heard, said he hasn't decided whether he will sign this legislation. You were once his chief medical advisor. Would you advise him to do it?
Well, Jim, I don't want to be advising him when I'm not in that position right now. I'm sure he's going to make the right decision. One thing we can say, we'd like to learn as much as we possibly can about information that hopefully will be available. You know, there's this two sides. You know, one group says it more likely is one or the other. I must say that we all must keep an open mind, Jim, about this for sure, because nothing has been definitively proven. The thing that's important is that if you look at the available data, not just surmising or tweeting or guessing, but just look at the data, a fairly large group of very well-respected evolutionary virologists have examined epidemiological, virological, geospatial data from Wuhan and have come to the conclusion, not definitively by any means, but feeling that it is much more likely that it is a natural occurrence from an animal to a human. However, since it hasn't been definitively proven, we've got to keep a completely open mind. That being the case, we want to know arguments or information or data on either sides. And that's the reason why, as you mentioned in the top of your discussion a little bit ago, we really need to get all the facts so that we can prevent this from happening again in the future. So my feeling would be, Jim,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I say my feeling would be, instead of arguing back and forth, why don't we do the things that need to be done to prevent this from happening again, regardless of what the origin was. If the origin was a lab leak, we've got to make sure we shore up the safety procedures that are done when people in labs are working with pathogens. And if it's an origin from the natural occurrence, we've got to make sure we pay much more attention to the animal-human interface and put restrictions on the kinds of animals that come into these wet markets, particularly in China and in Southeast Asia. Those are the things we should be concentrating on.
But simply put, you're not opposed to the intelligence community putting that information out there, as long as you're not jeopardizing sources and methods and that sort of standard thing.
Right. You know, I mean, obviously, you want to get as much information. If there have been recent, as you know, recent discussions that the Department of Energy has first said that they didn't think it was a lab leak, and now with low confidence, they're saying that it's a lab. I don't know what low confidence means, Jim, and I think that's what's confusing people, and that's the reason why we really got to get down to the bottom of this.
Yeah, do you think that was a mistake for the Department of Energy to put out that kind of conclusion, a conclusion with low confidence? Did that muddy the waters in your view?
No, Jim, I don't want to be criticizing agencies. I mean, I'll stay away from that. That's not helpful.
Yeah, I'll get to what he says here next in a moment. But what are your thoughts on the Department of Energy and actually a couple other government departments here? And I believe even the FBI saying it now that they believe it came from a lab leak, but with low confidence. Yeah, it's so, this is kind of the problem here. And this has also happened here previously with Russia in a somewhat related, non-related issue with Chernobyl. And we learned this when Ukraine broke off from Russia, and Ukraine actually found documents from Chernobyl. And you can watch this from the HBO series on this. And basically, they started a new government there. And Ukraine actually released these documents to journalists and let everybody see them. And thus, we actually learned what happened in Chernobyl. And without a regime change or a government change there, when Ukraine actually became a new country and a new government and not part of the USSR and the old Russia there, we might not have ever learned what the real truth was there. And you got to kind of think that that might be the case with China, unless the regime changes there, the government changes there, if it ever breaks apart and doesn't become, not the old communist China that it is now, and there's ever a regime change there. You think about what's happening now with President Xi there, now in his third term, which was never allowed before. They basically changed the rules for him. There's like a 3,000 member committee there that votes on this, and all 3,000 of them unanimously voted for him to break the rules and become a third term. It'd be like a president now getting a third term, which is, again, unheard of. It just shows you kind of how almost afraid of him they are, or like a totalitarianism that government has become there. So you guys let me know your thoughts here on this, but will we ever find out of China or be able to impose restrictions like, what they're saying about, don't bring certain types of animals to market there? If we want that or somebody else in the world wants that, how are we going to impose China to do that? Let me know your thoughts on this. But here, take a listen.
Well, let me ask you about another agency, and I know you've already had some discussions about this, but former CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield, your former colleague in the Trump administration, has accused you of excluding him from a conference call in early 2020 that included a discussion on whether COVID may have stemmed from some sort of lab leak. Just to get that on the record, what is your response to that?
Yeah, that's unfortunate, Jim. I have already commented on that, but I'll set the record straight for you here. And that's completely unequivocally incorrect. And I'm really sorry he came to that conclusion. Someone may have told him that. I had nothing to do and no choice about who would be on or not on that phone call. And at a public hearing, it's unfortunate he accused me of excluding him for reasons that I didn't agree with what his conclusion would be. But nothing about that makes sense, Jim. As a fact, and you could ask any of a number of people on the call, that I didn't exclude him because I had no say as to who was on the call. And secondly, his concern about being excluded because his his idea disagreed with mine, we had half the people on the call agreed that it might be a lab leak. So the rationale that he puts forth for being excluded doesn't make any logical sense, because half the people on the call didn't agree with that. So I'm not so sure what he's talking about. It's unfortunate that he made that statement publicly, because it's not true.
And that conference call that was in question, that apparently was tackled at this House subcommittee hearing this past week. Were you invited to appear at that hearing?
I was not. I have not been invited yet to appear at the hearings. I suspect that I will be. I think it would be a good idea to hear from all sides, but I have not yet been invited to appear before a congressional hearing recently. I've done many before, but with this particular topic, I have not.
And I know you've supported the theory, and we were just talking about this, that the virus came from natural causes instead of a lab leak. You've said you're open to the evidence wherever it goes. Has your thinking on this evolved at all? Did you start off as, oh no, it's definitely natural causes, and now you're thinking, well, maybe it might be a lab leak?
You know, Jim, I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process. What has changed over months to a year or more is what I mentioned a bit ago, namely that as evolutionary virologists went into this deeper and deeper and analyzed it from a number of standpoints, epidemiologically, virologically, geospatially, they wrote two very important, well-written, peer-reviewed papers in Science magazine, strongly suggesting that, in fact, it was a natural occurrence from an animal to a human. But strongly suggesting, Jim, doesn't nail it down definitively. And that's the reason why I say to this day, I will keep a completely open mind as to what the origin is.
And on this theory of a lab leak, I've been wondering this. Do we have any idea how that would even work? Have you heard any accounts as to how that might have happened? Is there speculation in the scientific community as to how that happened?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jim. So one of the things that people maybe don't fully appreciate, that all of the intelligence agencies agree unanimously that this was not engineered. Namely, they didn't deliberately do this to make a bioweapon. Everybody agrees with that. No matter what your prior thoughts were, everybody agrees with that. A lab leak could be that someone was out in the wild, maybe looking for different types of viruses in bats, got infected, went into a lab, and was being studied in the lab, and then it came out of the lab. But if that's the definition of a lab leak, Jim, then that still is a natural occurrence. The other possibility is someone takes a virus from the environment that doesn't actually spread very well in humans and manipulates it a bit, and accidentally it escapes or accidentally infects someone, and then you get an outbreak. Those are the possibilities when you're talking about lab leaks.
But are there any accounts of that occurring where one might say, okay, well, there we go. Perhaps this is it. This is what happened.
No.
That you're aware of.
In fact, there are no lab leaks that have led to pandemics. So there have been accidents in a lab that happens intermittently. We've had experiences with that in modern times recently, but there have never been a situation where a virus escaped from a lab that's a brand new virus that no one has ever seen before that led to a pandemic. That has not happened.
So Dr. Fauci says that a virus has never escaped from a lab and caused a pandemic. Was this one the first? You guys can let me know your thoughts here in the comments. Apparently, a bunch of our government agencies think so. They have released documents saying so. And if President Biden signs this bill that is passed the House and the Senate, Congress, we might be finding out more if these classified documents get declassified. We might be literally be able to see declassified documents on this. Will Biden sign it? I also found it interesting that he said that all government agencies have unanimously agreed that this wasn't a biological weapon, and they all agree on that. that it wasn't manufactured to be that way. And personally, I kind of agree with that because if you just think about that, if China was manufacturing something like that, how would they prevent it from infecting themselves? Just kind of think that through, right? Because a virus just goes, it's not just something that's like localized, right? Like tear gas or something along those lines, right? Where it's just like you would throw it and then it's just like right there. A virus just spreads out of control. So I do kind of agree with that situation or that train of thought. But of course, there are people that think that way. But we haven't seen any like experts that have unanimously agreed that way or anything along those lines. Of course, some people think that way, but that's what he says. So, and at least the government agencies and the expert agencies, but we'll see what happens when these classified documents come out if President Biden signs it. So, I'll keep you up to date here. Thank you so much for liking and sharing these videos so other people can get to hear this. And I'll keep you up to date here with more truth that comes out, not just from what Dr. Anthony Fauci has to say. So if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon so you don't miss out on new videos that come out here on our channel every single day. Here's some videos you can watch next. The Fed just sent out a urgent message to all low and middle income Americans. You can click this video to see that. And US banks are collapsing. Click on this video to see the information on that. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.